We are getting real close to a little holiday called Easter. Who's excited for Easter? Yeah? Anyone's favorite holiday, Easter? It never is it? Who's favorite? What's the favorite holiday usually? Christmas. And why is it your favorite holiday? You get presents, you get spoiled. Jesus is born. It's scary that was third on the list, but it's okay. We can think about that. I'm just kidding. Huh? They weren't in order. Oh, okay, sorry. That's good. That's good. So Jesus was born on Christmas. We get presents, we get spoiled, Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I believe you. But Easter, Easter is never really on the top of people's favorite lists. Not usually. For Christmas, in my mind, my thinking, from a Jesus standpoint, I always love Christmas because it's the beginning of something, right? It's the beginning. Jesus is born against all odds. He is born in a miraculous way. And that's something worth celebrating. That because of Jesus being born, that things would build up and eventually the plan that God has in place would happen. It would occur and the pieces would fall and all would go according to God's plan. But guess what? It's all building up towards something, and that something is Easter. The events that surround the Easter season. And though it is not as cheery and happy all the time, ultimately the events of Christmas and all that happened in the years that Jesus walked the earth, all of that led up to some very important events, and that included Jesus dying on a cross when he might not have deserved to do so, considering what he did or lack of what he did and was accused of. But we wait for 3 days, and ultimately there's some awesome celebrating to be had because, spoiler alert, he rises from the dead. And that is what is so important. If Jesus was an ordinary guy and just lived and was a good guy and did all that he said that we read about, and he did what he had to do, and then he died, and then he stayed dead, that'd be a different story. But the fact that he rises means that he is who he says he is. Who did he say he was? I am. I am. And that's what we're going to be diving into this series as we kind of inspect the life of Jesus. But who is he? Who is he really? Tonight we're going to be talking about darkness and light. Say light. Say darkness. Okay, now I need a little bit of help, and I should have mentioned it to the guys at the back, but I need a little bit of darkness. Can you do me a favor and turn some lights off for a moment? Don't do what you guys do in school and scream, because you guys are fine, all right? So if we could have some darkness here, and if you're watching on the camera later on, I'm sorry, you're not going to see me for a bit. And it's probably like trying to pull focus right now. So I do apologize for that, but I'm making a point. You see, we imagine living in a world of darkness. I'm someone who, if I'm at home alone or if I'm working in the office alone, usually my lights are off because it's easier on my eyes. It's a little more relaxing. But can you imagine if darkness consumed our world? If you woke up tomorrow morning and the sun did not rise. You checked your clock and no, it is not April Fool's. It indeed was the daytime, but the sun had not risen yet. It's probably impossible for you to fathom. You can't imagine that happening. There's so many things that would occur. But truth be told, our world needs light. The sun illuminates the day. The moon and the stars shine in the night. Where there is light, there is no darkness. And look at this. See, you can kind of see it here. We got too much on that. But as I move around and where there is light, there is no darkness. As you look where I'm pointing the flashlight, where there once was darkness, see how dark it is over here? And as soon as the light comes, there we go. Darkness is not a thing. All right, now we can turn the lights back on. Darkness is not a thing that just exists, right? Darkness is the absence of light. Where light is not, darkness is left to live. And as we open this series, we're going to be studying about how Jesus is the light of the world. Light of the world. We're going to dig into what it means for us today and how we can be changed because of Christ's light in our lives. Jesus' light expels darkness in our lives and the world. Say, my life. Say, the world. Both, right? Let's see what the Bible says about light. We're going to be reading John 8, verse 12. You got your Bibles with you? Feel free to turn to John 8, verse 12. We're going to be coming back to it. We're going to read it one time, and then we're going to come back to it. So don't feel that it is all for naught. But it is going to be up on the screen here as we read. So, read along with me. Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, you won't have to walk in darkness because you will have the light that leads to life. So, something to know is each time you read about Jesus teaching his followers in the Bible, he's always linking himself to somebody, and that is God the Father. He's always linking himself. At the time, they didn't know what to make of it. Some people were very offended by that because blasphemy, right? They didn't like that. No, you don't do that, because they didn't believe Jesus was who he said he was. But here, Jesus links himself to God as being the light of the world. The word light used in the verse comes from the Greek word phos, which means light or anything emitting light. Say phos. It's like the word that means enemy, right? Foes. Friend or foe, right? Foes. It's profound that Jesus says, I am, showing that light is actually a part of who he is. You know, we learn in school about similes and metaphors. He doesn't say, I'm like a light. He says, I am the light. He is the light. I am not like the light. I am the light. I radiate light. The character of Christ is light. And anyone who walks with him lives in light. So let's think about how natural light impacts our lives. Okay? How does light impact our lives? We mentioned it already a little bit. When we wake up in the morning, what do we got? We got light. Where's it coming from? Fantastic. All right. We've all had some science classes here. Let's move on. Okay. What are some other natural sources, or quote unquote sources of light when we get more into the dark times? The dark times. At night, what's bright? What's bright in the sky? The moon. The moon is reflecting some sunlight, so it's indirectly the sun as well, but we're getting a reflection from the moon. What else at night? The stars. The stars. Tons and tons of basically other suns that are just so far away. And these lights, honestly, I've been watching a lot of Moana recently. My daughter is really into Moana. Any Moana heads in here? Yeah, when you have kids, you will be. Or whatever new Disney thing is at the time. But in the movie Moana, they're wayfinders. And they're from a time way before technology like cell phones and anything like that. You can't get a signal out there. So what they do is, as they're on their boats and they're wayfinding, how do they find their way? They're doing this to the stars. They're seeing where they've been, where they're going, because the stars actually act as the first GPS. Where the stars are is a great way to find direction. It lights their way. When you walk into a dark room, what's the first thing you try to do usually if you're wanting to see? Flick on a light switch. When I come here in the morning, first thing I do, I turn some lights on. Then Pastor Tom comes in and wants to save some energy, so he turns some lights off. And then I go out and I turn one light on, just so people coming in can actually see where they're going. But why do we do that? Why do we turn lights on? Why do we want to see where we're going? Well, because by design, we're drawn to light. We're drawn to light. We instinctively depend on light in every aspect of our lives. We need to see. It invades every crack and crevice in our lives as human beings, both tangible and spiritually. And the light makes things evident, exposed, and clear, both literally and spiritually, shining a light on the darkest things. We're going to read John 8:12 again. Let's read that again, okay? Jesus spoke to the people once more and said, I am the light of the world. If you follow me, You won't have to walk in darkness. Remember that word, darkness, because you will have the light that leads to life. So darkness is mentioned in that verse. Light of the world, darkness. The darkness that's mentioned is the Greek word scotia, which can be defined as the darkness due to the want of light, and is used to describe ignorance of divine things. Say ignorance. Ignorance. When you are ignorant to divine things, you're living in darkness. And that's not where we are called to be. We're not meant to be living in darkness. We're called to light. When we are walking in darkness, it's like having no knowledge of what it means to walk in the light. Why would someone choose to walk in darkness when light is available? You know, sometimes you will, but most times you're going to want to be able to see where you're going. You want your path lit for you. Darkness is often associated in the Bible with wickedness, and because of that wickedness, misery in hell. If we jump back to Genesis, chapter 1, verse 4, it says, God saw that the light was good, and he separated the light from the darkness. So Jesus is the light of the world, and all who are unconnected from him, disconnected from him, far from him, they live in darkness. It's kind of cut and dry. You might be saying like, wow, there's not a middle ground. There's not like living in kind of nightlight territory where it's like a little bit of light. No, it's cut and dry. If you're not living in light, you're living in darkness. If you are not connected with Jesus, you are disconnected from Jesus. You are separate from Jesus. And that is not where we are called to be. That is not where I want to see each and every one of you guys. I want to see you guys walking with Jesus, living in light. We can't do both. God's word makes that very clear. Being separate, ignorant, or unaware to the dark leaves us wanting for something that we can't produce on our own. Other words, you can't produce this light. We talk about a lot of things here at Youth, and a lot of it comes down to when we talk about these things that Jesus provides, we can't produce these things on our own. We can produce some light bulbs that light our way for a time while we're here, but we can't produce that. We can feel some temporary peace from some of the things that we own, or the movies we watch, or the friends that we have. But do you get an everlasting peace from those folks? No. That's something that only Jesus can provide. So this is yet another thing that we have to cling to Jesus for. It's not a light we can produce on our own. We come to the end of ourselves, frustrated, hopeless, or a distant sense of happiness and joy when we navigate through life in darkness. We're just making it more difficult for ourselves. And it was by God's design that we crave the light. He wanted us to want the light. He wants us to want to walk in light. Jesus' light expels darkness in our lives and in our world. Let's read 1 John 1:5. This is the message we heard from Jesus and now declare to you. God is light, and there's no darkness in him at all. So there we go. We're getting a little bit of an afterthought here. Talking back to Jesus, what Jesus says. They're saying, hey, but they're not saying Jesus is light. What do they say? God is light. And remember, Jesus is God, right? There's all that connection. Jesus, I am. Which is a hearkening back to the time with Moses, with the burning bush, when Moses said, who are you? I am who I am. It's kind of God's calling card, you know. So he calls back to that. He says, I am. God is light, and there's no darkness in him at all. In Jesus, there's no darkness in him at all. And basically that's saying that wherever Jesus is, darkness cannot be. Wherever darkness is, Jesus isn't there right now. So if there's darkness in your life, that means Jesus isn't there right now. If Jesus is in your life, that means darkness isn't getting you. And that's a great place to be. That is a great place to be at. Like I said, light by definition has no darkness at all. In fact, darkness is the absence of light. Darkness is the absence of a light source, anything shining in it. God's design for us was to walk with him in light. And sin casts shadows of darkness that separates us from him. It casts shadows. Sin isn't just some idle thing that happens. Sin is something that's coming from the devil that actively wants to separate you. Right? The devil doesn't want to see you succeed. If life is ever going really, really good, and you're like, I can't stop winning, right? Things are just going really good. Expect for there to be a little darkness coming your way. Because the devil hates to see you succeeding. The devil hates to see you doing well with Jesus, and that is when you're going to have to rely on him the most. So when things start getting dark, best thing to do, go to God. Get prayed up. Make it your first reaction, not your last resort. There's two areas we should explore here. First, Jesus' life expels the darkness in our lives. And where's the other place? We mentioned it earlier. Jesus' light expels the darkness from what's not our lives? Everything else. The world. The world. He expels it from the world. We can't tackle the darkness in our world until we begin to shine a light on the darkness in our own lives. You don't go out trying to save something or fix something when you're already damaged and suffering from that same affliction. You got to get yourself right. You got to fix yourself. You got to make sure that you are not living in darkness. God's divine plan has always been to draw us to himself, even from the fall, which was when Adam and Eve, remember, they sinned. They ate that fruit. They let sin in, shame. That's when it all began. But God's divine plan and what leads to this Easter story was to fix that, was to get us back right with him, to draw us close to himself, so that we would be in a close relationship with him, you and me with him. But sin drives a wedge between us to keep that light from shining. So what that also means is this. I mentioned about living in darkness. What that also relates to is living in sin. Okay? So what I want you to understand is this. If you're living in sin, you're living in darkness. Can I be honest with you, though? Little tidbit of information. You're human. You sin. We all sin. You might be thinking, Pastor Colt, that doesn't really make me feel better. That just makes me feel like we're all doomed. Well, maybe. But because of what Jesus has done and died on the cross for us, we have hope. So it's an active thing. Like our last series about actively growing, it's an active thing. We must work to stop the sin in our lives. What does that mean? Well, first of all, it means acknowledging it. Okay? Acknowledge the sin. What does the sin in your life look like? And if I ask you to right now, close your eyes and imagine and say, what is the sin that I'm dealing with right now? I bet you 9 out of 10 of you would be able to think of it right off the bat. The thing that I had dealt with for the longest time, and I still deal with it, is anger. Anger. And anger is a sin. Okay? It's not a sin to get angry, but it's a sin to act out in anger and to sin in anger and to be angry all the time and to be angry at your loved ones for no reason and to lash out at the smallest inconvenience. That was me. Okay? I had anger issues. I still do sometimes, mainly when I play video games. Maybe I should stop that. But I can never do that. But what it meant for me was I had to acknowledge and say, I do have an issue here. I am angry a lot, too much. And who is that affecting? That's affecting me. That was affecting my parents. That was affecting Lauren, because we were dating at the time, and she didn't deserve for me to be angry at her. That was affecting my friend groups. That was affecting my teachers, because I did lash out at them a few times. I got called to there was a time, I won't get too into it, but a parent-teacher conference got called because I couldn't keep a lid on it. And it only digs me deeper. And it wasn't until a little later down the road that I acknowledged it and I had to do something about it. But what can I do, right? Light doesn't come from me. Light comes from who? So, the first step is very important. You identify, what is my problem? What is my sin? And then you say, what am I going to do about it? Well, the only thing to do about it is bring it to God. So I say, God, I'm dealing with anger. And for you, it might be something different. But for me, it was, God, I'm dealing with anger. I pray that you would just give me some peace, that you would allow me to be slow to anger like you are. God, that you would just fill my life with a peace. Just fill my life with calmness. Just allow me to think before I act. And I got to tell you, it wasn't instant, but over time, it became easier. Easier to not be angry. Then I started driving, and then I had to deal with everyone around me, and it became difficult again. But that's the thing. It always creeps up on you. As soon as you think you got it under control, the devil starts testing you a little bit. And sometimes it's driving a gray Prius, right? It's always the Prius drivers, or the Kia Souls. But God is here. This is what he wants. And that's honestly where it begins. Identifying where my sin is and bringing it to him. And once we've done that, and once we begin to live our lives in that way, repetition over and over, God, I am still dealing with this. I bring it to you. Then we're ready to start going out into the world and trying to help heal it. Only when we recognize the darkness in our own lives do we begin to allow light to shine through and create a space for God's freedom to invade our lives and to begin working in those around us. So as we close tonight, I just want to encourage you as we get ready to go into our small groups. I want to encourage you this week, identify what is maybe one sin that I'm dealing with. What is one issue that I'm dealing with? What do I need to make right in my life so that I can be effective in going out and shining a light to other people? And can I encourage you, if you want to have a little bit of motivation, remember, we're trying to live and represent Jesus. Jesus was perfect. We're never going to be perfect, but we should do everything in our power to get to where as close as possible to that perfection, as close as possible. And don't be discouraged when you backslide, when you fall back, because guess what? Sin's going to creep back in and you're going to struggle again. But guys, make him your first stop, not your last resort.